completely change the design of the site over the next few months. And that enables us then to introduce online knowledge communities. So let me explain what I mean by that. Good. So let's first start. What is a community? It says so there. It's an informal network of people who have a common interest, which is nice. Every time you go to a conference, you're entering a community. The only problem with conferences is that the community lasts for as long as, from the moment you get your registration badge until the moment you leave and go to the train station. But online, a community is there 24/7, 365, but the nature of the interactions is a little bit less intense. And ideally, you combine the two. That's the most effective form of online community, is combined with an offline community. Why do we do it? Why do people go to conferences? Why do people join online communities? Well, it's quite simple. A well-designed community creates a collective intelligence. Now, we've got 50 people, 55 people in this meeting today. None of us know everything all 55 people know. Our collective knowledge is much greater than each individual's knowledge. And a good community will both create that collective knowledge and then apply it to each member's problems. So if you're a member of a community, it's quite a good deal. It means that if you make a small contribution of your knowledge, you'll get back much more knowledge from the other members. And that's the basic promise of a good online community, or any good community. They can be internal, they can be external. Knowledge for policy is going to be largely external, which means it's completely public. But as I mentioned earlier, there will be some spaces where only members can see. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, why are we doing communities for knowledge for policy? Let's go back to the mission, to bring scientific knowledge from across Europe together for policymakers across Europe. Well, communities connect people together, so we can use the communities to connect scientists together, and that way we can get that scientific knowledge from across Europe. In other words, we can increase the size and quality of our knowledge base. We can't expect a small team of JRC scientists to collect all the knowledge in the world, but if we have a good active community, we can get more scientific knowledge. And moreover, these community functions can allow these scientists to work together and generate more knowledge as well. So that helps create the scientific knowledge. And then we can connect that science to policy for the policymakers across Europe. I mean, we could, I imagine we could just ignore the whole online publication thing and just present the results of our work to EC policymakers via conferences like this. But isn't it better to put this online? We present all of that knowledge, we process it for policymakers, and we present it online for policymakers across Europe, and not just limit the benefits to EC policymakers. So one of the key things about this process is that all of that knowledge which has been crowdsourced and organized through community gets presented in formats policymakers can use, the policy level, and it's assured by EC quality control. It's high quality content. And that's one of the, if you like, the USPs, one of the unique service propositions that the site can bring. So that's the what and the why very briefly. I want to show you exactly how we're planning on doing it. You remember this diagram from the beginning? Okay, so we've got this knowledge base, right? And in that knowledge base, there's all sorts of types of content. There are like 6 or 8 different types of knowledge, like publications and data visualizations and data sets and things like that. Then there's news and events. We put them together in what we'll call the newsroom. Then we have projects. Now, projects are not publications or data sets. They're not knowledge resources. They are processes which create these knowledge resources. And they are all linked to organization profiles. And that's really important because this came out of the audience research. One of the few things that both scientists and policymakers said in common was that the credibility of a knowledge resource is largely driven by the publisher of it. So if this data set is linked to Eurostat, because Eurostat published that data set, we can be sure that it's of high quality. And so if it's not clear who published that publication, that reduces the credibility of the knowledge. So it's very important that we have organization profiles. And so if you go to the Eurostat profile, you can find all of the knowledge that Eurostat has published, which is on knowledge for policy, which has been made relevant to a knowledge service. So the credibility of this content is driven largely by the organization. And that link has been validated by the European Commission. To this picture, we're going to add community. We're going to create some more content types, and the most important one is going to be the personal profile. That's the building block of any online community. That's my page. My name is Matthew Lowry. I'm an information architect with an interest in online community and participation in policy. So here's me. And my credibility as a person in this particular world is, again, largely driven by the organization who employs me. So again, the personal profiles are linked to organization profiles because it's a large driver of the credibility. We will find more credibility to a person who works at the University of XYZ rather than somebody who's a volunteer activist writing from their bedroom. Now, a personal profile might get engaged in forums, they might submit blog posts, they might get involved in working groups. People do these things, but they can also become members of projects. They can submit content, so they could submit news, events. Here's another person who's submitted a knowledge resource and has commented on the news item submitted by this guy and commented on this person's blog post. So now I've got two people. And what these people are doing is they're having a conversation about knowledge in the knowledge base. So what we're not doing is having a knowledge base to the left and then a community over there to the right. We are integrating the two. These people are having conversations about knowledge in the knowledge base. And you can read that sentence in two different ways. They're having conversations about the knowledge in the knowledge base, the knowledge resources, the news items, the projects. But the actual conversations themselves are also in the knowledge base. So if you do a search of the knowledge base, you'll find not just publications and data sets and organizations, you'll find people, blog posts, comments, forums, because they're all in the database. So just as we don't have knowledge silos in different knowledge services, we're not going to have people silos either. Because if you look at these two personal profiles, you see that this guy, he belongs to the Foresight knowledge service because he's interested in migration and demographics and the future of migration. And this person is actually a member of the knowledge service for migration and demographics. So these people are members of different knowledge services, but they're in fact both members of knowledge for policy. And although they exist they appear in different knowledge communities, they meet in the database and they have a conversation in the database. So no knowledge silos, no people silos. This helps people discover each other. A simpler way of seeing this is we'll have a knowledge for policy community, but most people will see themselves as belonging to different knowledge communities. So some people are going to be members of the blue community, some people are going to be in orange, some people are going to be in both, some people are going to be in green, some people are going to be in green and orange. You know, you can have one profile, one account, but you can join and take part in different knowledge communities and without becoming part of a people's silo. And then in addition to that, we're going to add working groups. So as you can see, working groups do exist within a knowledge service community, but people from different knowledge communities can be members of them. And you can see that some people are members of both working groups here. And this is where we have something interesting. I'm going to show you a very, very technical diagram. Don't worry about it. This is a sitemap. Ignore it. This is basically what a knowledge service sitemap looks like. All the stuff in pink is community. And within that, we have a working group. And what I want to explain here is this. Within that working group, there is a zone which is visible only to the groups. Okay? So in other words, a knowledge service can create a community, can recruit people, can attract people. These people can join the community and have a public conversation. And then if the knowledge service wants to, for example, work on a report, they can invite certain members of their community to a working group, and those people can work in the workspace. And we've discussed this with Digit, and we can integrate Microsoft 365. So this is where people will be invited into a working group, and they can have chat on Teams, and they can co-edit documents on SharePoint. They can even use the wiki in Teams. And this requires some technical work, but this is the direction we're heading. But I want to make it really clear. Each working group has a public face. This is like the top of the iceberg, which is visible above the waterline. And that is really important, because if you don't do that, if you just have the Microsoft Teams, and you don't have any public record that this working group exists, you're breaking the law. You're breaking the EC Directive on Transparency, published in 2016. So we worked with our legal unit about this. So in other words, every time a working group is created, there's a page, it explains what is this working group, and it explains who's in it, who are members of this working group, and all of the content that is not private is public. So all of the inputs that the working group is using, all the inputs to their work is public, and all of the outputs of their work is public. It's just the drafts, the conversations as people work on a report together or define a conference work program, all of that can be hidden to the outside world because you don't share your drafts with the outside world. So that's the architecture we're taking for collaboration within communities. So that was a lot, wasn't it? How about I pass it back to Julia to see whether there's any questions I can answer.